Okay, so motility, we have a few motility patterns in the large intestine. Just like we saw in the small intestine, we have segmentation. But I want to spend a little bit of time talking about this motility pattern, which is unique to the large intestine. It's called mass movements. And basically, what a mass movement is, it's kind of like a giant, slow peristaltic contraction. So, what will happen is a segment of the colon will contract. The circular muscle will contract, and that will push materials forward. And then the next segment will contract, and that will push materials forward, etc., all the way down the line. So basically, we're pushing material forward. This happens 3 to 4 times a day, and it occurs in response to eating or stomach distension. Okay. And then the mass movements then also trigger defecation. Okay. So defecation occurs through, I guess you can't see it here, but there is a sphincter, like a circular muscle that is at the bottom of the rectum. It's called the internal anal sphincter. So when we have pressure of the contents of the colon pushing against um, the internal anal sphincter, that will cause the internal anal sphincter to relax. So that is an involuntary reflex. However, you might be aware that you don't just poop just kind of randomly. And the reason for that is because outside of our internal anal sphincter, we also have another anal sphincter called the external anal sphincter, which is under voluntary control. So in that way, we can control when we relieve ourselves. Okay. Okay, so as I mentioned in that first slide about the large intestine, we have a variety of bacteria living in our large intestine. In fact, the number of bacteria that we have living in our digestive tract is 10 times, about roughly 10 times as many as the number of cells in our body. Okay, so there's a lot of them. And the vast majority of the bacteria that live in our digestive tract live in our large intestine. Okay, those bacteria, like I mentioned before, do the job of breaking down undigestible materials, so materials that we are not able to digest ourselves. Okay, and then they release the metabolites from that breakdown, and we are able to then benefit from the job that the bacteria do. So we absorb those nutrients that get freed up through that process. Okay. I do want to take a moment here also to mention that there is a growing field of research around the gut bacteria, right? The gut microbiome, as we call it. So there's a lot of evidence, growing evidence, that the gut microbiome doesn't just do this, but it also greatly influences our health and our mental state, even our personalities. For example, there are studies, like I think in mice, that show that mate choice is partially governed by what bacteria are living in the mouse's gut. There are studies that show, like, if you don't have if you're on antibiotics and you don't have any bacteria living in your gut, these again are like studies in mice. So mice without any gut bacteria will suddenly be attracted to light, which is unusual since they are nocturnal animals. They will display greater symptoms of anxiety. There are studies where mice that have received fecal transplants from humans that have diseases like Alzheimer's, schizophrenia, So fecal transplant is you take the feces of a person and you put it in the gut of the mouse. So if you do that, the mouse will start to display some of the symptoms of Alzheimer's or schizophrenia. Um, and there are, some studies in humans where uh, fecal transplants from one human to another human appear to help treat certain diseases. Um, so very interesting stuff, very sort of young field of research. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to close by showing you this figure. So there's this figure in your book that shows you kind of the basic processes that happen at each step along the digestive tract. I'm not going to go over them, but I just want to let you know that this exists so that you can refer to it yourself. And thank you for watching.